Good afternoon. We've been involved in BIM for about 30 years, and for the last 10 or 15 years, most of that's been focused around asset management information for clients. So when the Hackitt report came out and talked about BIM being part of the solution, you can imagine that was something that was very attractive from our perspective. But the interesting thing about that is that if we look at the project that was shown earlier, the IMET project that Richard and Gary were showing, that's a project that we worked on. So we pulled information together to produce a coordinated model, which could then be used to create the COBE data. And subsequently, we've also been working with Interserve on their new headquarters building, a large project in Manhattan for Turner Construction, and also we worked with BAM on their health and science building. So the methodology that we're using to do that is typically to take the information and draw together all the COBE and the model information, and then pull that into an environment where we can check and validate it, and then pass the information out into any CAFM system. So you might look at that and say, well, that's actually delivering the golden thread, isn't it? Well, not really. Is BIM the knight in shining armour that perhaps Dame Judith thought it was? Well, it's not really achieving that yet, not in the form that it is, because it depends really what you call BIM. A lot of people still see BIM as being a 3D model and not the data. And clearly it's a combination of the two. I don't know how many of you might know Steve Race, but Steve was heavily involved in the original development of IFC. He was one of the authors. He wrote a book for REBA, BIM Demystified, and he ran the CPD program. One of the things that Steve always said was that building information modelling isn't really the right term. You might say it's management, but his preferred definition is better information management. So really it's about reliable data. That's really what we should be delivering. And how regularly do we actually provide that information from BIM projects to asset owners? The fact is it doesn't happen very often. We also work on existing buildings. So, for example, we've been working with the BRE to digitise the BRE. We've been working on a project here, which is an old factory that's been developed for student accommodation. And for about 15 years now, we've been managing Tower 42 to make sure that the cladding panels don't fall out on the floor, on the ground, which would give you a bad day. And we've cut our teeth also in reverse engineering NHS projects for people like Interserve, ENGIE and Sodexo, so that they've got a digital model that they can actually use to manage their liabilities and difficulties, penalties that they're imposed on. And that's given us a good grounding in terms of what information actually is needed. Richard from Birmingham University was talking this morning about what is it that the clients need. It's not just about CAFMs. And in fact, I often hear BIM specialists complaining that the asset team won't tell them what software application they're going to use. Well, actually, it's because they use lots of different ones. You've got people that are using the building, people that are maintaining it, and people that are paying for it. And there's a range of different software applications that they're likely to be using. Exactly the same with maintenance. People concentrate on the CAFM system, but typically CAFM systems are just used for planned and preventative maintenance. There's the BMS. There's often specialist applications for fire protection and that type of thing. And obviously, there's also the O&M. And then you've perhaps got Oracle or SAP being used within the rest of the organisation for management. So at the end of the day, really, we've got a range of different software applications that are being used in the OPEX stage, and they need data, they need coordinated data to be delivered in a standard way. It's not a one-off handover at the end of the delivery process. So we need that asset information model, that digital model to be there. The challenge that we've got is that the way the industry works at the moment is that we've got a huge amount of capability during the design phase of the process, probably up to about stage 4, where everything or many things are digital, and then we drop into more of an analog world where the installers are actually using standard technology, and that is creating a data gap. And that data gap, then somebody's got to come along and fill it. So typically, we get very regularly FM organisations having to commission surveys of buildings that have just been completed. Mad. And they're never going to get the quality of information that they should be getting, because it's great doing point cloud surveys and photogrammetry models, but you can't see things that are already closed out. So what we need to do is have that digital model running right the way through the process and making sure that we can actually cut out the analog and make it digital. It might be that you still produce drawings and documents as analog material, but it needs to come from a coordinated data set from the start. So what we've got is a situation where we've got perhaps dozens, even hundreds of files that are being produced, models, because people talk about the BIM model, but actually there's probably 20, 30, 50 BIM models. And then somebody has got to coordinate that. We often end up as the poor bugger in the middle that's actually trying to glue these things together. And then by the time you actually work that out, you then pass it through information to the client, and they can't really make head or tail of what they've been given. So what we need to do is change the process. We need to transform it so that we're actually starting with a series of standardized requirements and standardized data libraries that we can then use so the client can explicitly say what it is that they want. That was what the panel was saying this morning that was needed. So if the client can actually say, this is the data I want and this is how I want it structured, the industry's got an opportunity to actually get that right and do it once and get it consistent. So the asset information requirement goes out to the supply chain, and what they're then able to do is, because they're then able to test their own submissions, so that what we're actually doing when we're pulling this information back in again, it's already been predefined and pre-corrected. So it means that the client's got a set of information that's already been tested, validated, and quality assured. So what we've been doing over the last year or so, we've been working with Peabody and a number of other clients, is to actually provide asset information requirements and a set of standard tools to actually validate that information that comes in. We've also created product library technology that allows us to then create something once and then test it and then reuse it many times. And that goes into a project information model, which in turn can produce a digital O&M and an asset information model that can then be used going forward. So some of the more progressive clients have been following this route, and this is an example of one of those, where we've actually got a lot of information there. It's actually issued as a document, which then somebody's got to try and interpret. Now the data's there, but actually I think that's really quite challenging to read and interpret. And if you're a flooring contractor, for example, you've got to scroll down here and find the one that is relevant to you and then go and pick which elements you're responsible for. And you can imagine it's very easy to get that wrong. The other thing that's interesting about it when we look at it is that the warranty information hasn't been asked for, which is extraordinary, I think. I mean, why would somebody not want to know that they can get something replaced for free. So that's really been put together, I think, by somebody that actually doesn't understand asset management. So the tools that we've built are trying to simplify this. We've created a library management system for creating asset information requirements coming from a database. So you're standardizing the way things are done. And what you're then able to do is have all of the potential assets. This is what Richard Draper was saying this morning. Not everybody is going to want the same information about a boiler. So we've got a standard set of information which is then you can pick from, and you can decide which data you actually want, and that gets stored and repeatable. So in the case of Peabody, we've been working with their asset team and going through and identifying the property sets and the attributes that they actually are going to use. But we're also using behind that the template technology we developed with the BRE, so that we're standardizing the way things are described as well. So the impact of that is that what goes out to the supply chain is an explicit set of information, not generic, but for every single asset type. So if you're a heating engineer, you know that's the information that you need to be able to provide. So it tells you what you've got to provide and what you haven't got to provide.
Sure. Can I just say, I'm really keen that we have some time for the...
Yeah, sure.
So I know we're going to be talking a lot about
Sure.
Peabody. So
Okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, so what we're then doing is we've reverse engineered, we've got a product library tool that also will connect in with other product libraries so that this information is then drawn into the project itself. So in this particular case, we've got the product library, which allows us to identify automatically which project that particular product was used in. So it means that we're able to look down the track to see which projects things were used in. And also we can look through the other end of the telescope to actually identify all of the assets that are actually in that particular scheme, in this case the boilers, and then be able to see where they are. So we're actually presenting this straight from the COBE data and also in 3D. So it's a matter of seeing things in a number of different formats. So here we've got a plant room in the IMET building that we were talking about earlier. So we click on a boiler, we see the data that's in the cloud about the boiler, and it can then go straight back to the product library. So where are we with this, with the golden thread? You might say we're actually there. We're not. So about 3 or 4 years ago, we started working with David Miller Architects, and they were looking at a more innovative way of managing data rather than entering it into the Revit model. And when we showed them that it was possible to actually manage that in the cloud, so it meant that they weren't using Revit technicians to actually put that information in, it made the life a lot easier for them. And when the Golden Thread Challenge came out, we started looking at how we could actually satisfy the need. And it's not that easy, because we're actually looking at how you take a specification and then run it through procurement, value engineering, products get swapped out. How do you track that through? So this is the solution we came up with. So we've got the asset information requirements, and basically what we're able to do is write to that the code and reference that we actually want to use through the whole life of the job. So this is a golden key, is what we've named it. And we've also got the instance information there, and also what it's going to be called in the CAFM system. So it means that we're actually tying those things together so that right the way through the process into schedules and then into the design and construction process, we're actually tracking into design, into construction and procurement, and then over into the asset management side of things, the handover, the O&M, and then into operations. So the principle there is that we're then gluing those things together. So finally, where we are is we've got a series of building blocks which are reusable libraries, standard data templates, requirements, and a product library. We're applying those at the moment with PRP to the safety case, so using that to actually standardize the way the safety case is put together. We've taken the Create Master O&M that was developed for Peabody on this particular project, and we've extracted from that so that we've got a series of libraries and standard requirements, which then are being used on new schemes going forward. So in this one, this is another PRP project, which is in design at the moment. So gluing that together. So over to Jack now, I think.
Thank you. Do you want to just do?
Sure.
Just going to ask. Thank you very much.
Thank you.